Ladies and gentlemen, the Football Scoop podcast is back. I am Scott Roussel, your host. I've got college football experts Zach Barnett, John Brice with me. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to see you. I want to dive straight in. It's Thursday before a massive game weekend. We're going to talk about a couple of the biggest games in the country because they're just too good not to. I know you guys are chomping at the bit, but I want to get quick thoughts. I want to ask you guys in 15 seconds or less, give me thoughts. JB, I'll start with you. Georgia Bulldogs.
Georgia Bulldogs are just not as good. And if you'll remember, I said in our bold predictions, I didn't think Georgia would three-peat. I stand by that prediction.
I think they're good. Okay.
Zach? Not as good. They're good.
Wolverines.
Michigan, holding serve. It seems like every game they've played has been 31-6 and not interesting or compelling, which is, considering their garbage schedule so far, it's where they should be.
Off the top of my head, I think they have Penn State towards the end and then Ohio State at the end, and nothing else between there, right? 31-6 is every week, right?
Yep.
Okay, Texas, Zach.
Up and down. In a way, I think the Alabama game has kind of occupied their entire season so far. It seemed like they were looking ahead to the Alabama game in week one. Then they played the Alabama game, and then they were clearly hung over from the Alabama game. So starting this week, we'll find out how good this team really is.
JB, how about Florida State?
Same as Zach. They have the capacity to be really good. We'll know a lot more if they're truly ready to excel after they visit Death Valley and Clemson this weekend.
Did Tulane expose USC? I can't get over it. It happened. Seriously. Did they make any changes on defense?
No structural changes. They got some new players, and so far they're performing better than they did at AT&T Stadium.
JB, we're going to learn a massive amount about Ohio State this weekend with Notre Dame. We'll talk about the game in just a second, but overall, Ohio State, give me some quick thoughts.
Super talented, still really, really talented. Travion Henderson, maybe the best running back in college football. Certainly he belongs in the discussion. Zero discussion. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver in college football. I contend he might be the best wide receiver in college football since a Keyshawn Johnson or a Calvin Johnson, one of those guys. Marvin Harrison Jr. is that guy.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's a strong statement.
Zach, is Penn State for real?
For real, I don't think we have enough to answer that question yet. We're going to have to see them actually go out and beat Michigan and Ohio State. So, incomplete.
Washington's offense has looked really good. Is their defense good enough to hold up?
I like Washington's defense better than USC's defense.
Oh, my God. What does that say?
Okay, well, they're in the same conference, and right now Michael Penix is playing as well as Caleb Williams. So, yeah, I like what Washington's doing. I think the Pac-12 this year is the best conference.
Yeah, if I were to rank teams that I would be terrified to play against, Georgia would be one, and Washington, they'd be top three, and they might be number two.
I can't. My brain hasn't processed past they're better than USC's defense. So is my middle school team over here. But okay. All right, moving on. Notre Dame, I believe, is straight up legit. JB, give me some insight.
Yeah, I definitely do. Notre Dame has 2 NFL tackles in Joe Alt, Blake Fisher. College football has never been more quarterback-driven than what we've seen the past 2 to 3 years. Notre Dame finally has a truly top-end elite quarterback in Sam Hartman Jr. And then cornerback Ben Morrison. I'm curious to see if we get to see Ben Morrison versus Marvin Harrison Jr. this weekend inside Notre Dame Stadium. He's just a sophomore. I've already had an NFL scout tell me he could be a top 15 pick in the 2024 draft, he being Ben Morrison at the cornerback position, already being likened to the next Ahmad Sauce Gardner. We'll find out a lot more about Notre Dame's secondary and revamped defense this weekend against Ohio State.
There's like 10 more teams I want to go through, but I also just want to rip my shirt off because I'm so excited about Ohio State and Notre Dame.
Please don't.
I got to transition to the game. I got to. I know you don't want to see this. JB, Ohio State, Notre Dame, I can't think of a bigger one. How's this game play out in your eyes?
Yeah, I can't think of a bigger one since we've been up here in South Bend. Of course, my wife's a native, but we've only been up here about half a decade. They hosted Georgia here in 2017. That was a huge game. But remember, Notre Dame was coming off of a disastrous 4-8 campaign from that 2016 season. So the feel was not the same. They hosted Michigan in 2018 after that 2017 bounce back season. Of course, they had a really good 2018 campaign. But this is big. This is decades long big for Notre Dame from the people I've talked to, being likened back to the Bush push game in terms of the biggest games here at Notre Dame Stadium in this century, in the 2000s. I think it's a relatively low scoring affair. I don't see these teams swapping scores up and down the field all game long. Won't be as low scoring as last year when Ohio State won the game 21-10. Notre Dame had a very deliberate, let's try to keep it close game plan to the fourth quarter and hope something happens. And Notre Dame did that. Notre Dame was up on Ohio State 10-7 into the second half last year, and Ohio State scored the game's final 2 touchdowns to win by 11 points. Notre Dame believes it can dictate the tempo and the pace a bit with that offensive line I referenced, especially Joe Alt. He's as good as anybody at any position right now in college football. And Notre Dame has a stable of running backs. Ohio State finally got on track offensively last weekend. Kyle McCord looked much more comfortable and in command of that Ohio State offense. I thought that Western Kentucky could score a little bit more than it did on Ohio State last week. That opened my eyes up a little bit because Western Kentucky tends to score on just about everyone. That game got briefly close, was like 14-10, and then Ohio State pulls away to win at 63-10. But I don't think this is the same Ohio State team. And look, Paris Johnson is starting for the Arizona Cardinals at tackle. DeJuan Jones is starting for the Cleveland Browns at tackle. And C.J. Stroud is starting for the Houston Texans at quarterback. They can't be the same team. So I think the roles are relatively reversed from a year ago. Notre Dame was far more unproven and didn't have as much of its identity set under Marcus Freeman. That was his first regular season game as head coach. Now you have the single most experienced quarterback in college football in Sam Hartman, who's played in 50-plus games, and you have all those other things that I alluded to. Notre Dame is not great at rushing the passer. They do have some fairly exotic blitzes that Al Golden has put in, and we've not seen all of those blitzes yet. That's going to be the key. If they give Kyle McCord too much time with that running game of Travion Henderson and the rest of those guys, plus those wide receivers, Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, then it'll be a long day for the Notre Dame defense.
I know JB and I are picking Notre Dame straight up. Zach, you're on Ohio State. What's your thinking there?
Okay, so this leads into my big stat going into this game is since 1998, in games, showdown games where both teams are in the top 10, Ohio State is 31-18 in such games. Notre Dame is 3-18 in such games. Ooh. So how much does that matter? I think in some ways it doesn't matter at all. Like what happened in 1998 has no effect on the players on the field. In some ways, I think it matters a ton. I mean, we've seen Ohio State win these types of games time and time again. Not every one of them, but more than their fair share. We've very rarely seen Notre Dame rise to the occasion in games like this. We've seen them play close, but very rarely do they win these games. And what's different about this Notre Dame team is that they're explosive on offense. For years, Notre Dame has been plotting. This team, Sam Hartman's over 11 yards an attempt. Passing, Audric Estime is 8.27 yards per carry running the ball, which is first in the country among all running backs with his number of carries. And so this was a real toss-up game for me. And in the end, I went with the brand that I trust to come through in these moments more. But truly, it's 51-49.
Yeah. Those stats are incredible, Zach. Great research by you. I would point out last November, I don't even think Notre Dame was ranked. It certainly was not top 10 when they ended at the time Clemson's undefeated season. The other stat that probably won't hold after this weekend, but sort of is something Notre Dame's leaning on because it has only 6 sacks through its first 4 games. Notre Dame's defense does lead the country in pass efficiency defense. They're really versatile and deep in the secondary. It's not just Ben Morrison, the star, but Cam Hart is a graduate senior who's really good, really long limbs, runs very well. He's playing the best football of his career. He's been a versatile guy back there. He's played a number of different positions. DJ Brown, another graduate level safety, 6-year guy who's playing really well. They've got him in a new hybrid position. I think they're calling it the spear package, where he sort of has some freedom to either be a third safety or to be a de facto linebacker playing closer in the box. So Notre Dame is doing some more things. Al Golden has proved to be a really good defensive tactician for Notre Dame. Al Golden, it's no secret, would very much like a chance to become a head coach again. And I think this is an opportunity game for Al Golden to showcase that.
Zach, JB mentioned Clemson. I thought in your on the line piece on footballscoop.com, I thought you did a great job explaining what's really on the line here for Clemson. And also, we'll get to Alabama in a second, but talk me through Clemson, Florida State.
Yeah. So if Clemson loses this game at home, they've won 25 straight home ACC games, and they'd be 1-4 in their last Power 5 games if they lose this game. And most immediately, I mean, they'd be 2-2 on the season, and they'd be 0-2 in conference play. And that's not a team that, I mean, that let alone is nationally elite. That's not a team that's at the top of their they'd be in last place in their conference a third of the way through the season. I mean, I don't need to dress it up any more than that. This is a program that was the gold standard for many years in college football, not too long ago, but they would move from down to just being another team that you check in on Clemson on a Saturday, but your Saturday does not revolve around what Clemson's doing. It does not begin or end with Clemson. They would just be in the mix with 60 other programs.
Yeah, I think this sets up nicely for Clemson to get the upset, even though I picked FSU because of the facts, all the elements that Zach alluded to. This is a stand your ground game for Clemson, and it's bigger than just this weekend. It's bigger in the moment than just this weekend. And Zach notes all the reasons why. But look, if Clemson loses this game, you wonder if Dabo can hold it together, if there's a tailspin. There's not the same leadership at Clemson right now that there has been from a player standpoint in recent years. They're obviously not the same since losing Venables and Tony Elliott to their respective head coaching opportunities. And quite frankly, as I've already alluded to a couple of times on our podcast this season, they're not skilled the same. They have not recruited the same. They're not remotely as talented. I love Will Shipley. He's a really nice running back. And then beyond that, it's hard to name Clemson skill players that could go start or play significant roles for any other top 5 or top 10 team. They're not as good on the offensive line. But this is also very much a prove-it game for Florida State. Can they handle modest success that they've had so far this year? Can they prove that they are the team that dominated LSU throughout the second half, or are they the team that couldn't close the door on a pretty listless Boston College team last weekend?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, JB, like in week 1, when the juxtaposed with Florida State's big win over LSU and Clemson just laying an egg against Duke, there was a lot of criticism of Dabo of, well, he doesn't engage in the transfer portal. The game's passed him by. He's too stubborn. And he came out and said, look, if I ran this program the way people wanted me to run this program, I would have been gone a long time ago. And I mean, that Dabo is stubborn to a fault, and his stubbornness took him to the top. And right now, I mean, if they lose, it's going to be the narrative is going to be his stubbornness. He is going to ride them all the way back down to the bottom. And you mentioned, for years, Clemson's wide receiver room was as good as anyone in the country. And now they're pedestrian there. And Florida State has Keon Coleman, maybe the top transfer in the country this year at wide receiver. He was a difference maker against LSU. If he's a difference maker against Clemson, then it's going to be a tornado of ugliness around that program.
Yeah, because look, if they lose this weekend to Florida State, as you noted, 0-2 in the ACC is a 3-game de facto deficit. You're done. You're cooked at that point because, again, if you're Clemson and you lose again this weekend, you're not going to not lose the rest of the season. I don't see anyone who would buy into that. And then you need Florida State to lose 3 times. I just don't see that scenario happening for Clemson. That's why it's as big of a September game as Clemson has played, I don't know, half a dozen years.
Yep. All right, the Lane train heading east, Tuscaloosa. Kind of big game, kind of fun game.
An exciting game.
A lot on line there. Zach, tee that one up for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick Saban for a long time, he's the gold standard of coaches. He's discipled so many coaches, and for years, I mean, he just dominated them. We had the article for years that I've stopped keeping up with because it's no longer relevant. Like Kirby Smart surpassed him. Jimbo beat him in 21, nearly beat him in 22. Sark nearly beat him in 21, beat him in 22. And now if Elaine goes into Bryant-Denny, then it's going to be like, how can you not argue that the game has passed Nick by when all of his assistants are suddenly now beating him, the guys that he used to just pummel? And the fact that they're playing Jalen Milroe, I think, tilts the game towards Alabama, just because, even though it's not pretty, it's not the offense you want. You can generate offense with him behind center. And frankly, I don't trust Lane and Ole Miss to go in there and win this game. But again, the vultures are going to be they're circling, and they'll land if Alabama loses.
How in all of the conversation this week, and I'm saying generically, you, we, us, whomever, how in all the conversation this week about who's calling the defense at Alabama and whether or not it's Kevin Steele or T-Rob, it's T-Rob. How are we not talking more about Pete Golden's impact at Ole Miss already, and what Pete Golden could mean this weekend for Ole Miss? And I think that's where Pete can give Ole Miss the edge. I think I picked Ole Miss in this game. I like Zach and Ohio State, Notre Dame. I believe this is truly a coin toss game. I think right now Ole Miss is a little further along as a team because of Quinshad Judkins, because Jackson Dart is operating at a high level, not as good as what we've seen from some Ole Miss quarterbacks, but he's playing at a high level. He's doing it through the air. He's running the ball effectively, and they're not turning it over. And I think with Milroe, he presents that dynamic, or as Philip Fulmer used to say, he's going to make somebody's band play. It just might not be Alabama's. It might not be the $1 Million Band. It might not be Alabama's band. It might be the Ole Miss band. So a fascinating matchup for me. And as Zach alluded to, people have started picking off Nick Saban in recent years, Kirby Smart in 21 and in last year, and then Jimbo, as he noted, and then Steve Sarkisian just earlier this month. And yeah, the questions are real about Alabama. Much like Clemson, Alabama has not recruited quite as well in recent years. They've recruited better than Clemson, but they don't have the talent and depth stockpiled quite as much anymore. As a coach pointed out to me this week, for the last 4 or 5 years, Georgia has taken 3 to 5 players that Alabama really wanted. And I think that you see that difference right now.
Well, to answer your question, you started with, why aren't we giving more shine to Pete Golding? And everybody loves Pete, but Ole Miss has had Tulane and Georgia Tech. These are not prodigious offenses. These are, they're nice offenses. Apologies to USC's defense for what they do.
I was about to say, you just touted Tulane as exposing USC.
They had Tyjae Spears, who, was All-American. That was last season. USC still remembers it. It left its mark, whatever. Tulane owns real estate in Southern California now. It's very nice.
No, I wasn't.
Anyway,
moving on. Yeah, I wasn't saying give Pete his shine or give him his flowers or whatever. I'm just saying we haven't talked enough about that dynamic. And I think Lane has probably done that on purpose. Not only has he deliberately stirred the cauldron over in Tuscaloosa because he knows exactly what he's doing, and I think it's brilliant, but it's also deflected away from the fact that the Pete Golden can earn every bit of his 7-figure salary this weekend alone in the eyes of Ole Miss.
Okay, there are 330 million people in this country. And if Ole Miss beats Alabama on Saturday at around, let's say 8:30 Saturday night, as they're loading the buses to go back to the airport, will anybody be more satisfied, more happy in the world, in this country, than Pete Golding sitting in his bus, sitting in his seat on the Ole Miss charter, if they're pulling out of Bryant-Denny Stadium with a win, and he thinks to himself, we just did that? I don't think anybody in the country would be happier than Pete Golding.
Maybe Lane.
Lane
Lane wants this one. Lane wants this one. It's Pete's first time going back against Saban. Lane really wants this one.
With all that said, I'm on Saban.
I picked Alabama as well.
I know I picked the Lane train. I think I typed Lane train. Choo-choo.
All right. There's some other really good games. I want to talk about what I think is going to be an unbelievable ball game. I think we're on different sides in this one. It's out in the Pac-12. UCLA, Utah, I think has the makings of potentially the best game of the weekend that no one will watch. Yeah, I think Chip Kelly's offense is legit.
And it's in that 2:30 time slot, 2:30 God's time against Alabama, Ole Miss, and Prime versus Oregon. So, yeah, it won't get the viewers it deserves by far.
It is a great matchup. Certainly, UCLA's offense is further along than what we have seen thus far out of Utah's offense. But Utah gets this game at home. Bryce Eccles will be roaring. I like the Utes at home for that reason. It is a fascinating matchup, and it will be one of the best uniform games of the entire weekend because those are two beautiful ensembles that those programs have.
Yeah, and you've got maybe the biggest spread in terms of age and experience among quarterbacks we'll see this season with a 6-year guy in Cam Rising who looks like, and we don't know for sure, looks like he's probably going to play against Dante Moore playing his first Pac-12 game as an early enrollee true freshman. And the fact that it's in Salt Lake City makes me lean towards Utah, but I'm going to be excited to have this game in my YouTube multi-view.
YouTube TV, good job. All right, I'm coming back to Prime in a second because we're contractually obligated, I believe. Penn State, Iowa. Give me some thoughts there.
Yeah, this is the first, I guess, real test for Penn State. We all know that Iowa is still pretty bad offensively, but the Hawkeyes, once again, are a very staunch defense, and this is an opportunity game for Penn State to show that they are real or prepared to be realer than they have been in recent years. The game is in Happy Valley. I think they're doing a whiteout maybe. So, if Penn State doesn't win this game double digits, then I'd be a little concerned.
Yeah, I mean, so far the Brian Ferentz story has been kind of a fun subplot. But it's been fun because Iowa has gone about it in a comical way of trying to really hold Brian Ferentz accountable. And so Doug's done a good job keeping up with that. I don't know where he stands, but if Iowa loses this game 20-14 or something like that, it's gonna be like, what are we doing? Like, we have a team that can compete for the Big Ten championship and we can just score. Like, we've got to be better than this on this side of the ball. And it needed to be for a long time.
I think the Brian Ferentz meter is at maybe 28 points per game because Iowa rang up maybe 41 points last weekend. He was subpar through 2 weeks. He got over the hump this past week. I have to imagine that he'll be in position to be staring up at 25 points per game after this week.
So JB kind of said he sees Penn State with potential to go up, to win 10 plus. If that happens, I think that you say, all right, Penn State's got a legit shot to make some big wins at the end of the season. I don't see many teams doing that to Iowa. Iowa just fights so hard. They don't lose by 2 touchdowns. So if that were to happen, that would be a real big sign to me that Penn State is in this thing for real. It'd be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I think Penn State should win this game in a 24-10, 27-10 neighborhood, and I don't think it'll be the last time we see Iowa losing a game where its defense plays well enough to give it a shot into the fourth quarter, and its offense probably doesn't give it that shot in the fourth quarter. All
right. Prime versus Dan Lanning.
Love it. Love the hype. Oregon is going to smack Colorado. They just are. Look.
They just are.
Colorado is going to be without Travis Hunter for several weeks. They were not the same team without him against a fairly pedestrian, and that might be a compliment to Colorado State last weekend. They were very fortunate to win that game. I stayed up into the wee hours and watched every bit of it. They deserved to win, so I'm not going to take that away from them. But also they were aided in victory by a number of dubious decisions by Colorado State, including something along the lines of 16 penalties for 165 yards, including a key penalty in the overtime session that really cinched the win for Colorado. So Colorado has been a great story. They've already busted Zach's bold prediction bubble. But this is where the undefeated run ends. And I think Vegas has Oregon as a 20.5-point favorite or something along those lines. And I would be inclined to take Oregon minus the points were I gambling this game. You disagree?
Take Prime and the points. Okay, Oregon has the potential to score points as they have demonstrated against Portland State and Hawaii.
And Texas Tech.
Texas Tech, they were in a battle. They had to come back and win.
On the road. This one's at home.
Agreed. So, what do we know about Portland State and Hawaii just aren't comps. They're not. So, all right, they were in a battle with Texas Tech, and they fought back and won. Good. That doesn't say they're going to boat race the Buffs. I don't see it.
It can be 28-14 with 10 minutes to play, and they score another touchdown and win 35-14 and cover. Ditto, it could be 35-20. Yeah.
Take the points, baby.
Oregon is winning this game. Oregon is winning this game, and their fans will not be sweating in the fourth quarter.
It sucks that Travis Hunter's not playing. I mean, that takes a lot of the air. It sucks. It's terrible all the way around. For me, what's interesting, I agree with John. What's the on-field product has fueled the hoopla. The hoopla off the field has fueled the on-field product. And just as interesting to me has just been the 9.3 million people watched that game on Saturday night. I'm astounded by that. And the audience for every Colorado game has grown. So I'm going to be just as interested to see the TV audience for this one coming off. I mean, the story's only getting bigger, but the competition in that time slot elsewhere, I'm going to be really interested to see what the viewership numbers are for this game.
Also, as our good man, Doug Samuels, our captain, wrote yesterday, Oregon is debuting those new Nike Dunk cleats that pay homage to Phil Knight with the Buck nickname sewn onto the back of every shoe. Oregon is not losing in special edition Phil Knight cleats at home with Phil Knight in the house.
Take the points and go to the bank. When I win a chicken dinner. There's a lot of other games we could talk about, guys. I'm going to open the floor to you guys. Is there one game either of you wants to throw out there? You each got the floor, one game, your choice. What do you got?
I'll go first. I mean, the most fascinating team to me right now, given that we're a quarter of the way through the season but still know very little, is Oklahoma. I mean, they moved from 20 to 16 in the AP poll, but you look at the various computers and they're top 5 team, like number 1, number 2 in some metrics. Like ESPN has them at a 50% chance to make the playoff right now, and they've played nobody. Their one real game they played was against SMU, and it was 14-11 in the fourth quarter. But overall, they've outscored their opponents 167-28. I mean, which is what you'd expect Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan to do against a lousy schedule. So they're on the road at Cincinnati, 11 a.m. God's time, big noon game. This is a game Oklahoma should win, but Cincinnati should make them sweat. Oklahoma hasn't run the ball very well. Cincinnati's D-line should be tops toward the top in the Big 12. So if they can bottle up the run game and get after Dylan Gabriel, we'll see. Dylan Gabriel's a great quarterback in fair conditions. When it gets windy and rainy, he tends to go downhill fast. So if Oklahoma wins this game, 42-14, I'm gonna be like, all right, this team really is for real.
Cincinnati had a really bad loss last weekend to a MAC team, and I think so much have been focused on getting to host Oklahoma in their first home Big 12 game, and then the wind is out of the sails a bit there. I'm going to cheat and do 2 quick games that I'm really excited to see. BYU at Kansas. I think the winner of that team will be ranked next week. If BYU can win at Arkansas, you think then BYU can go win at Kansas. But this is another one of those prove-it games for Kansas. And then another contest featuring 2 ranked teams would be Oregon State at Washington State. Washington State's better than I thought. Washington State handled Wisconsin. Oregon State has really been rolling under Jonathan Smith and has sustained the momentum that it created last year with that improbable comeback against Oregon, where it ran the ball for like 27 minutes straight in the second half and still came back and won the contest. So that's a great underrated Pac-12 game or Pac-2 game. That's a conference championship game when those 2 are just the only members in the conference.
Whoever wins this game should get a trophy. Somebody go make a trophy, and whoever wins it should get a trophy.
They have the Cy-Hawk trophy for Iowa State. We need some sort of a Beef Coug trophy for the Oregon State Beavers and the Washington State Cougars.
That's a lot more wholesome than the trophy I was going to suggest. So we'll go with what JB said.
This is a wholesome program, Zach.
Keep it clean, man. All right, so I'm a degenerate college football guy. Georgia State, Coastal Carolina tonight. Georgia State, you got to be excited for Sean Elliott. He's had some good men on his staff that have gotten hired away to programs that can flat out pay more. Sean's had a rough go at Georgia State, and to see them undefeated, some nice wins under their belt already, potential to go into Coastal and go and wind up 4-0 after this game. I think it's just a great story. So I'm cheering for these guys tonight, and should be a great weekend in college football. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time today. I look forward to this weekend's game with as much excitement as I have any other week of this season. It's going to be great. Let's go make the best of it. Yeah.
Let's go get a win, Dougie Sam's in Comstock Park.
Friday night. College football is the best. Talk to y'all soon.